Welcome to our podcast. I'm Ruth Baron, and this is Sheree Harvey.
Hi.
She's a counselor at Inner Health, a premier behavioral provider specializing in mental health disorders and addiction treatment. Today, we're going to talk about suicide prevention. And Sheree's going to help us better understand what maybe are some warning signs that you might notice in a friend or a coworker. What are some healthy things you can do? And what are treatment options? Those are a few of the questions that we'll address today. So let's begin by what are some of the warning signs? If you think someone is contemplating suicide, what things should you be looking for?
These days a lot of people use suicide talk as a coping mechanism. And so it is actually more common to hear people talk of suicidal thoughts. You might see something like that they're talking about it, journaling about it. They may journal about it. We see that a lot in the media with a lot of the nationwide crisis we've had. We hear about people journaling. So I am a mom, and I believe it's okay to look in your kid's journal and understand if there's any red flags there that could be telling us that this person is contemplating suicide or something that is harmful to them or others. Another sign you may see is just chronic depression, someone that seems kind of in despair. And you may see that not just by how they speak or what they talk about, but also how they look. Do they look unrested? Is their hygiene poor? Are they not showing up for work? Are they isolating themselves? Those are things you might see as well that should, kind of fire up some alerts that they might need to see a professional.
Great, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Are there certain risk factors?
Yes.
That we should be aware of?
Yes, definitely. What I will just point blank tell you is that if someone is having some kind of suicidal thoughts, plus they are drinking or using substances in any manner, plus they have the access to a lethal means like pills or a gun, that is someone who is in immediate danger. And that should be taken very seriously, and you should take action. You don't necessarily have to be addicted or in addiction to be suicidal. That's when, that's the red flag. That's not necessarily the red flag. You can have someone who doesn't have addiction, but on the weekend they decide to drink a lot, or maybe they have a, cocaine binge or something like that, or they smoke a lot of marijuana with friends at a social, and but they have some suicidal thoughts and they're expressing that, or that they have that history of that. Having the substance on board impedes their judgment. So
Sure.
Now all of a sudden they're having some suicidal ideation. They've got the access to, or they've got the substance use that's going on. And if they have access, this is when accidents happen. And so you want to be very aware of those. So I like to kind of just jump to that because that is a red flag. You don't have to actually be addicted to something for that to be a risk of suicide in your life. If you're struggling with suicide ideation and then you go out drink or you use and you have access to lethal means, then which could be pills or a weapon, then you could have an accident and accidentally hurt yourself or try to hurt yourself to where it ends you up in a hospital in a chronic situation. So,
are there steps to this? Like first, as you said, they're depressed.
Yeah.
Then second step, they're using.
Yeah.
Is there kind of a gradual step process to that?
Well, I think that's hard to really say that, so scientifically that there may be some steps. I think it's more of symptomology that you see that we talked a minute ago about, where there might be some chronic depression. Maybe they've made statements in the past. Maybe, a 36-year-old who had an attempt when she or he was 15. Those kind of things you can look for that could show that there might be a red flag that this person is more serious. So past attempts, chronic depression, And then substances, yes, that can, like I said, impede or impair your judgment to where you might actually carry it out further. Another symptom you would look for that would put you at higher risk for contemplating suicide is if you have a terminal illness or a chronic illness or chronic pain. That in itself can get in the way of someone thinking rationally because they're in such chronic pain or they have just got a diagnosis of a terminal illness. And we see that a lot in correlation to actually carrying through on an attempt or committing suicide.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that does happen sometimes.
So say you see some of these warning signs and, what's the best thing that you can do to help someone?
Well, definitely, if you're not a professional, get a professional involved. And I am a professional, so I'm going to say get to a professional. There are scenarios when friends or family feel they need to solve this. And they can definitely stay with them. They can definitely make sure any weapons or access to, pills is put away, even Advil, Tylenol, but also prescription medicines. And that even if you're not sure if they're carrying out something, but you just have a gut feeling or you're not comfortable with how they're talking about their situation and they're, kind of alluding to suicidal ideations, it's okay for you to get those things that could cause harm protected as you are taking the time to get that person to a professional. But I would definitely stay with the person if they're acutely suicidal and call 911. There also is another, just recently our nation has come out with 988, and that is a suicide-specific hotline for suicidal issues. And so, of course, as a licensed therapist, I love that we do have that. I'm shocked we haven't thought of it earlier. But instead of just 911, you can call 988 as well and get help. But you can, like I said, you can stay with them and kind of talk them through getting to a professional. If you are a professional, you can as well get them to more of an acute setting or get them to someone that specializes in mental health, like a psychiatrist or a licensed therapist. If it's more acute and they do have a plan and the means, you can as well call 911 or 988. And I usually just let the person know this is what I'm going to do because it's for your safety. And the other thing that you can do, let's say that if you have a family member that's calling you and, you live in Texas and they live in Milwaukee, or say you're a physician, a provider, and you have one of your patients that calls you and tells you, that calls you and says they are thinking about suicide, and then they hang up on you. You can do something called a welfare check when you call 911. And a welfare check is when, the emergency personnel will come to where the person's home is or wherever they may be without lights, without sirens. There's not a lot of drama, but they'll come and they'll do just a welfare check. How well are they doing? And you can call 911 and ask them to do a welfare check so they won't go with the lights and the sirens. And it's just a calmer experience and less traumatic for the patient or the individual suffering with addiction.
So whether
with suicidal thoughts.
So whether you're a professional or a family member, you can request that.
You sure can. Anybody can request a welfare check. And it's just a calm way to have someone checked on when you're not sure that if they're alone, their intent, if they have access, you can always do a welfare check. It might make your patient or your family member a little irritated, but we'd rather live with that irritation than regret. And,
Yes.
that's what you have to think about when you're having to make these calls is I want to be able to sleep tonight and know this. I've done everything to make sure this person is okay. The bottom line is if people are going to speak of suicide and talk about suicide, or you see some of the symptoms that I just talked about, it's okay to take this wherever you need to go to get a professional involved. And again, you want to be able to go to sleep at night and have no regret.
So do you think family members think there's a stigma involved?
Yes.
And, oh, we can handle this?
Absolutely. It's really, I think sometimes what puts family members on edge is the stigma that they feel they're putting on the individual. And the individual might feel upset with them, and that's no fun. But a professional can help you sort that out later as well in therapy or some type of support. But, there is still a stigma of mental health. But I'm going to tell you as a therapist, I have heard more and more people more open about talking about suicidal thoughts or past suicidal thoughts. And so I do think that's a sign that our, community is changing and how they're looking at mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But, we do. We're a society that expects everybody to be well, But there's a lot of things that we all go through. The main thing is getting the coping skills on board to deal with your life situation, whether that is situational, you've had a death in the family, or whether that is situational with a divorce, or whether that is something more chronic like a terminal illness. There are supports out there, and more agencies and facilities and organizations are creating supports to be able for people to have their fingertips at it. And plus we have all this availability for online support as well. And I would take recommendations on what's online, because anybody can put anything online. But I would, like the Mayo Clinic and, WebMD, those are areas you can trust. And plus enterhealth.com. That is a place that you can go where we have webinars on suicide issues, and we have lots of different resources to education on anything around mental health, addiction, etc.
Great.
Is that helpful?
Yes. What are some ways that we can incorporate healthy mental health tips or guidance to our family members, to our coworkers? You mentioned some things like calling
Right.
the
988.
yes, or
Yeah.
the wellness
Right.
welfare check.
Right. Welfare check.
But what are some other ways that you can assure them that you're here for them
Right.
in a healthy way without placating to that and making it worse?
Right. Well, I definitely think as a family member, it's okay to have open conversations about mental health, addiction, and it's okay to ask someone if they've ever had suicidal thoughts or had hopelessness or despair, or chronic depression. Depression in itself is feeling sad most of the day, every day for just 2 weeks,
Oh, wow.
And so you do have to add a few other factors in there, like no interest in activities you used to like and such like that. But as you see, it doesn't take much to get into depression. You may have a situational depression around an event in your life, but if over time you're still depressed, now you're getting into chronic depression, which is actually changing your brain chemistry. So that's why you have to see a professional to get some medicines on board that can maybe jumpstart your brain chemistry again where it needs to be jumped, not to get too technical. But if we get strep throat, we probably could go without an antibiotic for strep throat, but the antibiotic's going to help jumpstart us in our bodies into healing. So when you look at it that way, medicine's a resource. Seeing your family doctor, encouraging someone to see your family doctor. If you're a professional, having resources in your lobby. I can tell you from personal experience, having a child that's 26 years old. When she first went to a pediatrician, I never answered mental health questions. And once she became like 15, their practice started putting in mental health questions as part of the assessment for just an annual physical. And so if you're a physician, you can do that. You can add some mental health questions into your physical. Is there a history of your thought, or have you had thoughts of, suicide? And it starts a conversation between a professional and their patient or client. But it is okay to have these dialogues around the table as well with the family. Because you asked someone about suicidal thoughts in the past doesn't mean you're suggesting it. Mm-hmm. And that's something people worry about and kind of walk on eggshells about. It's okay to ask people. And you'll tell by their reaction if this is something of concern or not. But again, you want to get a professional involved if they do say, yes, I have. If they say, yes, I have, but it's been 10 years, that's different than, yes, I have, just last week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think in the workforce, we can also provide through our insurance benefits, or our employee assistance program that allow for some counseling assessments, to be able to have access to those things like a mental wellness program, or like I said, an employee assistance program that will allow resources in the workplace, mm-hmm. So that, employees have access to something to help them in those situations so that it doesn't get to a chronic place of I'm feeling in despair and hopeless and I want to end my life.
And, even more important when it's, somebody that you work with or
right.
Someone that works for you as a manager,
right.
Treading on
right.
concern, but
right.
Getting them help when they
right,
need it.
Exactly. And if you're a manager or you operating in a company setting, making sure that the departments that are there for human resources and such, mm-hmm. that you can refer them to human resources for those deeper resources. If you're feeling like it's not appropriate for me to address this, check with your human resource department or make sure your human resource department will have access to these type of resources so they can easily access, by the way. You don't want the employee to have to walk down the hall and go in there and ask for it necessarily if they don't want to.
Right.
You want it to be able to be available on portals or websites and such to be able to get them access to it.
So maybe even reminders in company emails.
Absolutely, yeah. You can do Suicide Awareness Month and Mental Health Month and mm-hmm. different things to, advertise, if you will, that here's some resources for you. Just like you would, it's so-and-so's anniversary date, it's so-and-so's birthday, this is the company 5-year anniversary. You can also do, Mental Health Month and different things like that.
Great. So we talked about, discussing this, but as you said, calling for help. If you feel like somebody's in immediate danger, right. Like what else do you do while you're waiting for that help to get there?
Right. You again would make sure that any type of weapons or access to lethal means to harm yourself, knives, access to pills would be removed, as long as you're not getting into conflict with that person. I have had an individual once who was with someone who was talking about suicide, and they, tried to kind of help them a little bit on their own. This is not a professional, but help them a little bit on their own, and, didn't really know what to do. Should I call 911 right now? Will that make him mad? I know he has access to a gun back there. And all of these things happen, and as time goes by, it increases your risk of an accident or something happening. So the long of the short, or the short of the long, is just go ahead and call 911 or text a friend. I'm here with so-and-so and they're not doing well. Can you have a welfare check or, send for 911? Even myself as a professional, I'm not going to sit with someone acutely suicidal and talk them out of it. They're not in a rational state. So I am going to get 911 involved myself, and I'm a professional. So there is no problem with, going ahead and taking that step first. And you can stay with them as long as you feel your safety is not compromised. But be aware if there's any access to anything around the home that you're at or what have you. But you want to get help there and other people as soon as you can.
Great. I think it would be helpful too if we provide some of the resources that you talked about
for our audience, we'll be putting that on the frames that you can look at and then access, because there's several different things, different
Right.
organizations and help
Right.
that we can give you.
So, in review of things that you can, resources that you can lean on for more support, again, is 988-911, interhealth.com for resources, but you also can direct people to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-TALK, or the crisis text line, text HOME to 741-741 to contact a crisis counselor. There's also the Trevor Project for the LGBTQ community, and there's a helpline at 866-488-7386, or text START to 678-678. There's also the Veterans Crisis Line at 800-273-8255, and press 1, or text 838-255. You can also reach out to your local mental health services, clinics, hospitals, facilities, or any therapist, maybe even through your church.
Well, thank you again for being with us. We are holding a seminar with Sheree on August 17th. We hope that you will join in on that. She will be talking about some of the subjects that we discussed in our podcast, but then maybe expand even more on some areas that could be helpful for you.